as filed. Climb and maintain 8,000. Denver departure will be 120.9er. Squawk 5417.
In order to fly in controlled airspace when the weather is below VFR minimums, you must file an IFR flight plan and receive an ATC clearance. An ATC clearance is your authorization to proceed to your destination while maintaining the rules established for instrument flight. In order for ATC to provide the proper aircraft separation, you must not deviate from the clearance unless you are experiencing an emergency or receive an amended clearance. Therefore, if it's apparent that the clearance will, in some way, jeopardize the safety of your flight, you should request an amendment. For example, let's say that you receive these instructions before you take off.
Clear to the Carlsbad Airport is filed. Climb and maintain 15,000.
Your aircraft, however, is not equipped with supplemental oxygen, making the proposed flight at 15,000 feet unsafe and illegal in a non-pressurized aircraft. In this case, you need to request an amendment to your altitude prior to departure. Sometimes the clearance you receive is different from the one you requested. For this reason, pay close attention when copying it and note any changes from your planned route. You should not attempt to copy the information when you're in the process of taxiing or performing other flight duties. If ATC advises you that your clearance is ready to copy, you should ask the controller to stand by.
Warrior 312, clearance. Cincinnati ground, Warrior 312, stand by. Cincinnati ground, Warrior 312, ready to copy. Warrior 81312 is cleared to the Greater Pittsburgh Airport, Lunken 1 departure, Appleton transition, then as filed. Maintain 2,500, expect 10,010 minutes after departure. Contact departure control on 124.5, squawk 5415. Roger, Warrior 81312 is cleared to the Greater Pittsburgh Airport, Lunken 1 departure, Appleton transition, then as filed. Maintain 2,000.
Although a complete readback isn't required, you're expected to read back altitude assignments and any instructions requiring verification. You should also repeat the clearance if you feel the need for confirmation, especially if it differs from the one you were anticipating. To assist you when copying clearances, they are always given in a particular order, beginning with the aircraft's identification, then the clearance limit, departure procedure, route of flight, altitude, holding instructions if appropriate, any special information, and frequency and transponder code. Now let's look at some of these elements in more detail. The first item is always the aircraft's identification.
Warrior 81312.
Following the ID is the clearance limit.
Cleared to the Greater Pittsburgh Airport.
Usually this is your destination airport. However, it could be an intersection, nav aid, or DME fix short of your destination. For example,
Cleared to Atwo intersection. Expect further clearance at 1132.
an expect further clearance time, EFC, should always be given if your clearance limit is short of your destination. You should expect new instructions at least 5 minutes before reaching the clearance limit. At this point, the controller will approve you to fly beyond the fix or instruct you to enter into a holding pattern. A holding pattern is a maneuver designed to keep your airplane within specified airspace limits while waiting for a further clearance. Unless an emergency exists, you should not proceed beyond the clearance limit without ATC approval. Following the clearance limit is any specified departure procedure.
Lunken 1 departure, Appleton transition.
This may be a special procedure called an instrument departure procedure. Or it could also be a specific heading or altitude to fly after takeoff. Departure procedures are published for certain controlled airports. Each has a procedure name followed by a number.
This example shows the Lunken 1 departure at Cincinnati. Departure procedures will be covered in more detail in a later program.
The route of flight is the next item. When there are no changes in your filed route, ATC may just clear you as filed. Note that this only applies to the route portion of your flight plan. Also notice that even though the
Departure procedure
is part of your flight plan route, it was still given as a separate item in the clearance. When the clearance is not as filed, ATC route instructions may contain any combination of designated airways, VOR radials, courses, or radar vectors. The next item is the assigned altitude.
Maintain 2,500. Expect 10,010 minutes after departure.
You will always get an assigned altitude even if you've been cleared as filed. However, instead of a specific altitude, you can request VFR on top. This allows you to remain on an IFR flight plan, but lets you fly at any VFR cruising altitude, from the minimum IFR altitude up to but not including 18,000 feet, as long as you're able to stay in VFR conditions. When necessary, holding instructions are the next item in the clearance. Unless the pattern is charted, holding instructions contain the following: direction of hold in relation to the holding fix, the name of the fix, and the radial, course, bearing, or airway which you are to hold on. Finally, the holding instructions contain an expect further clearance time.
Hold southwest of Atwu intersection on Victor 115. Expect further clearance 1132.
The final items in the clearance are the assigned radio frequency and transponder code.
Contact departure control on 124.5, squawk code 5415.
Not all of your clearances will be complicated or lengthy. For example, you might be issued this clearance.
ATC clears Cessna 52241 to Snyderville Airport as filed, cruise 6000. Contact departure control on 123.8, squawk 5263.
A cruise clearance authorizes you to climb, descend, or cruise at any altitude between the assigned altitude, 6,000 feet, and the minimum IFR altitude. You are not required to report altitude changes to ATC. However, once you do report leaving a specific altitude, you cannot return to it without ATC authorization. The cruise clearance also allows you to use any approved IFR approach procedure at your destination. On long flights, you can expect to be handed off to different ARTCC controllers.
Cessna 52241, contact Albuquerque Center on 132.8 at Las Vegas.
In some cases, a considerable amount of time may pass from when you first receive the new frequency until you actually make contact with the next controller. Therefore, you should always record each frequency as it is received. After you have received the initial clearance, it may be necessary for ATC to make modifications or amendments. Any conditions or instructions given later take precedence over previous instructions. An example of an additional clearance would be an approach instruction given when you reach your destination.
Cessna 52241, 15 miles north of the Carlsbad Airport, you're cleared for approach.
The term cleared for approach means that you have the option of flying any published instrument approach to the airport. On the other hand, if you are given the following clearance,
Cleared for the ILS runway 3 approach.
you are authorized to fly only that particular approach. To aid you in copying clearances quickly and accurately, clearance shorthand symbols have been devised for frequently used words or phrases.
You'll find a complete listing of the symbols in Chapter 3 of your manual. You can use these symbols or devise your own. However, the test of any good shorthand is whether or not you can read and understand a clearance after it's no longer fresh in your mind. If you can, then you've developed a good system for taking shorthand.
To see how this works, let's take the following example.
ATC clears Warrior 81312 to the Greer Airport. After takeoff, climb on a heading of 010. Cross Boyles intersection at or above 2,000 feet. Victor 54 to Spartanburg, direct Greer. Maintain 5,000. Contact departure control on 119.8 at Holly intersection. Squawk 1100.
That clearance would be very difficult to copy using longhand. Now let's see how that same clearance would appear using shorthand.
ATC clears Warrior 81312 to the Greer Airport. After takeoff, climb on a heading of 010. Cross Boyles intersection at or above 2,000 feet. Victor 54 to Spartanburg, direct Greer. Maintain 5,000. Contact departure control on 119.8 at Holly intersection. Squawk 1100.
An ATC clearance is required anytime you are flying in controlled airspace when the weather is below VFR minimums. Understanding how a clearance is presented, knowing the terminology involved, and learning to take good IFR clearance shorthand will help you operate more easily within the ATC system.